Everyone said that King Lachlan Moore wasn't a man, he was a death sentence. Standing 7 feet tall with a reputation for ripping throats out first and asking questions later, he agreed to a peace treaty for one reason only, to secure his borders. The price? The perfect, pristine daughter of his enemy. But when the wedding drums stopped and the heavy velvet veil was lifted, the entire hall went dead silent. The woman standing at the altar wasn't the princess he was promised. It was the exile, the scandal, and the look in the giant king's eyes shifted from boredom to a terrifying primal obsession. This is the story of how a lie started a war, and how a wrong bride became the only right thing in a world of monsters. The vintage lace of the wedding dress felt less like silk and more like a shroud. Standing in the drafty guest room of her father's manor, Vivian Sterling stared at her reflection in the cracked vanity mirror. She didn't look like a bride, she looked like a sacrifice. "Stop fidgeting," her father, Alpha Richard Sterling, snapped from the doorway. He was nursing a tumbler of expensive scotch, the ice clinking against the glass, a sound that used to make Vivienne flinch when she was a child. Now at 24, she just felt a cold, hollow resignation. "You look acceptable, that's all that matters." "Acceptable?" Vivian turned, the heavy train of the gown swishing over the hardwood floor. "I'm an imposter, Richard. You're sending me to the slaughterhouse to save your golden child." Richard crossed the room in 2 strides, his hand gripping her chin, forcing her to look up at him. His eyes, a muddy hazel, held no warmth. "Felicity is the future of this pack. She has the breeding, the temperament, and the public's love. You?" he sneered, letting go of her chin with a dismissive shove. "You are the mistake. The wild thing that ran away to the city to play human. You should be grateful I'm letting you back into the fold at all." Vivienne rubbed her jaw, her green eyes flashing. "You're not letting me back in. You're trading me." Lachlan Moore asked for the eldest daughter. Technically, that's Felicity. When he finds out you swapped the prom queen for the family disappointment, he won't just annul the marriage. He'll burn the Sterling lands to the ground. "He won't find out until the ink is dry," Richard said, checking his Rolex. "The contract states a daughter of the Sterling bloodline. It does not specify a name. You are of my blood, unfortunately. Once he claims you, and he will. He's a beast with appetites like any other. The treaty is sealed. If he kills you afterward, well," Richard shrugged, finishing his drink. "That's a tragedy we can spin for sympathy." Vivian felt nausea roll in her stomach. This was the reality of the werewolf elite in the modern world. To the humans in the nearby town of Oakhaven, the Sterlings were just a wealthy, reclusive family who owned the timber mills. In the shadow world, they were politicians dealing in flesh and blood. The door creaked open, and a young man slipped in. It was Tobias, her 19-year-old brother, looking pale and sick. He was the only reason Vivian had agreed to this insanity. Richard had threatened to send Tobias to the front lines of the territory skirmishes if she didn't comply. "Viv," Tobias whispered, ignoring their father. He adjusted the veil on her hair, his hands shaking. "I gassed up the Jeep. It's parked round the back. We can go. Right now. I don't care what he does to me." Vivian softened, reaching out to squeeze her brother's hand. "No, Toby. We run and he hunts us both down. You know the laws. Rogues don't survive winter." She forced a smile she didn't feel. "Besides, maybe the stories about King Lachlan are exaggerated. Maybe he's just tall." Richard laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Lachlan Moore, the man is a genetic anomaly, a throwback to the ancient Lycans. He crushed the skull of the Northern Alpha with one hand last winter. He doesn't want a wife, Vivian. He wants a hostage, and you are going to be a very well-behaved hostage." The sound of heavy engines rumbling up the long driveway cut through the tension. Black SUVs, the escort had arrived. Time to go, Richard said, fixing his tie. Put the veil down. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not look him in the eye, and for God's sake, cover that scar on your neck. Vivienne lowered the thick, opaque lace over her face. The world turned into a blurry haze of white. She wasn't Vivienne Sterling, the art school dropout and coffee shop barista, anymore. She was a pawn in a game played by monsters. She followed her father downstairs, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She was walking toward the beast, and she had no weapon but her wits. The drive to the Obsidian Peaks took 3 hours. The landscape shifted from the lush green forests of the Sterling territory to the jagged, imposing gray of the mountains. The Moor territory was brutal, cold, and efficient. There were no decorative gardens here, only fortified walls and patrol towers. When the convoy stopped, Vivienne was ushered out into the biting wind. The palace wasn't a castle. It was a modern fortress of glass, steel, and dark stone built into the side of a cliff. She was led into the great hall. Reek! It was cavernous, lit by iron chandeliers holding real fire. The smell hit her first pine, rain, and an overwhelming scent of power. It smelled like ozone before a lightning strike. Hundreds of wolves lined the sides of the hall. Members of the ironclad pack. They didn't chatter or gossip like the Sterling wolves. They stood in absolute silence, watching her with predatory curiosity. At the end of the aisle, standing on a raised dais of black marble, waited the king. Even from this distance, Lachlan Moore was terrifying. The rumors hadn't done him justice. He stood nearly 7 feet tall, his shoulders broad enough to block out the light. He wore a tuxedo that looked strained across his chest, as if the fabric was fighting a losing battle against the muscle beneath. His hair was dark, shorn close on the sides but longer on top, and he had a beard that didn't hide the hard, square line of his jaw. Vivienne's father gripped her arm, his claws digging slightly into the silk. "Remember," he hissed, "submission." They walked down the aisle. Clack, clack, clack. Vivienne's heels echoed on the stone. Every step felt like walking off a ledge. As they reached the dais, the air grew heavy, almost hard to breathe. This was the Lycan aura, the dominant pressure that forced weaker wolves to their knees. Vivienne fought the urge to whimper. She bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted copper. "I am not weak. I am not weak." King Lachlan didn't look at her father. He didn't look at the crowd. His eyes, the color of molten amber, were fixed solely on the veiled figure in front of him. "Sterling." Lachlan's voice was a low rumble, a bass note that vibrated in Vivienne's chest. "You are late." "Apologies, Your Majesty." Richard bowed, his voice oily and fake. "My daughter needed time to prepare for such an honor." Lachlan descended 1 step. He towered over Richard. "Let's get this over with. I have borders to patrol. No vows of love, no poetry. Just a business transaction." An officiant, a nervous little man with glasses, stepped forward and rushed through the ancient rites. Vivienne zoned out, her pulse roaring in her ears. She heard the words bind and obi and eternal, but they meant nothing. "Do you, King Lachlan Moore, take this female to be your mate, to protect and hold until the moon falls?" "I do," Lachlan said. It sounded like a threat. "And do you?" The officiant turned to her. "I do," Vivienne whispered, her voice cracking. "Then, by the laws of the Lycan Council and the old ways, I declare you mated. King, you may unveil your bride." The moment had arrived. The air in the room seemed to be sucked out. Richard took a subtle step back, ready to do damage control. Lachlan stepped forward. Up close, he radiated heat like a furnace. His hands, large and scarred, reached out. He didn't snatch the veil. He took the hem of the lace with surprising gentleness and lifted it up and back. The lace fell away. Vivienne raised her chin. She refused to cower. She looked straight up, meeting those amber eyes. The silence that followed was deafening. Lachlan stared. He looked at her dark, messy curls. Felicity was a platinum blonde. He looked at her sharp, defiant jawline. Felicity had a soft, heart-shaped face. He looked at the faint, jagged white scar running from her ear down to her collarbone, the mark of a rogue attack from her childhood. The king's eyes narrowed. His pupils dilated, swallowing the gold until his eyes were almost black. He didn't look angry. He looked struck. Richard cleared his throat nervously. She is beautiful, is she not? A true sterling. Lachlan ignored him. He leaned down, his face inches from Vivian's. She could smell sandalwood and musk on his skin. You, Lachlan murmured, his voice dropping to a register only she could hear. You are not the woman in the photographs. Vivian's heart stopped. No, she breathed. Lachlan's hand moved. The crowd gasped, expecting violence. Instead, his thumb grazed her bottom lip, rough skin against soft. You're the one who ran away. The broken one. I'm not broken, Vivian snapped, the fear momentarily replaced by indignation. A corner of Lachlan's mouth twitched. It wasn't a smile, but it was close. And you have a tongue on you. He straightened up, turning to face the hall, blocking Vivian from view with his massive body. He looked directly at Richard Sterling, who was sweating profusely. Richard, Lachlan boomed, his voice echoing off the stone walls. It seems there has been a substitution. The ironclad guard stepped forward, hands on their weapons. The tension in the room snapped tight. A minor change, Richard stammered. Felicity, she fell ill. A contagion. I could not risk your health. Vivienne is my blood. She is healthy. She is terrified, Lachlan interrupted. He turned back to Vivienne. He grabbed her hand, his hand completely engulfing hers, and lifted it high in the air. Vivienne flinched, expecting him to announce the fraud and have them executed. The contract is sealed, Lachlan roared to the crowd. The sterling blood is mine. The alliance stands. He looked down at Vivienne, his eyes burning with an intensity that made her knees weak. Take her to the high tower, he ordered his beta, a grim-faced man named Weston. Lock the door. No one enters but me. Wait. Vivienne tried to pull her hand back, but his grip was iron. What are you going to do? Lachlan leaned close to her ear again. I'm going to find out why your father was so desperate to get rid of you that he'd risk a war with me. And then I'm going to decide if I keep you or feed you to the wolves. He released her. Go. As Weston led her away, Vivienne glanced back. Lachlan was standing alone on the dais, watching her walk away, his expression unreadable. But she noticed one thing. He was clenching his fists so hard, his knuckles were white. The high tower was not a dungeon. It was a penthouse. Vivienne stood in the center of the room, her wedding dress pooling around her feet like a melted candle. The suite was massive, encompassing the entire top floor of the fortress. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the obsidian peaks, now swallowed by the night and a howling blizzard. The furniture was sparse, modern, and made of dark leather and chrome. It was a bachelor's pad, devoid of warmth or feminine touch. It was also a cage. The elevator required a retina scan. The stairwell door was locked from the outside with a heavy maglock. Vivienne shivered, though the room was climate-controlled. She walked to the window, pressing her hand against the cold glass. Down below, she could see tiny specks of light moving in the courtyard, wolves on patrol. She was trapped with the monster. Stop pacing. You're wearing a groove in my floor. Vivienne spun around. She hadn't heard the door open. Lachlan was leaning against the doorframe, watching her. He had discarded the stifling tuxedo. He now wore a simple black t-shirt that clung to his chest and gray sweatpants that hung low on his hips. Without the formal wear, he looked even bigger if that was possible. More primal. He walked into the room, closing the door behind him with a definitive click. He carried a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. "Drink," he said, pouring a generous amount into one glass and holding it out to her. Vivian stared at the amber liquid. "Is it poisoned?" Lachlan snorted a dry, humorless sound. "If I wanted you dead, Vivian, I wouldn't waste good whiskey. I'd just open the window and let the cold take you." She took the glass, her fingers brushing against his. A spark, like static electricity but hotter, jumped between them. She pulled back quickly, spilling a drop on her wrist. Lachlan's eyes tracked the movement, his nostrils flaring slightly. "So," he said, moving to sit on the massive leather sofa, spreading his arms along the back of it. "Richard Sterling sent me the broken daughter, the one with the scar, the one who spent the last 4 years living among humans in Seattle working as..." He pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. "A barista?" "I was a shift supervisor," Vivian corrected, her voice tight. She took a sip of the whiskey. It burned, but it settled her nerves. "And I wasn't broken until my pack decided I was." "Tell me about the scar," Lachlan commanded. It wasn't a request. Vivian unconsciously raised a hand to her neck, covering the jagged white line. "It's nothing. It's not nothing. It smells like old magic and silver burn. Werewolf claws don't leave marks like that unless they're dipped in poison." Lachlan leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Who did it?" "A rogue," she lied. It was the rehearsed story she had told for a decade. Liar. Lycan was in front of her before she could blink. The speed was unnatural. He didn't grab her, but he boxed her in against the window. He reached out and gently moved her hand away from her neck. His fingertips traced the scar, sending shivers down her spine. "This was done by a pack member," Lachlan murmured, his voice low and dangerous. "This is a discipline wound. Someone tried to slice your vocal cords." Vivian's breath hitched. No one had ever guessed that. "It doesn't matter. It was a long time ago." "It matters," Lachlan said, stepping back. "Because I need to know what I've purchased." "Why did Richard swap you? Is it because you can't shift?" Vivian froze. The secret she had guarded with her life. "I can smell it," Lachlan said, walking back to the whiskey bottle. "Or rather, I can't smell it. You have no wolf scent. You smell like vanilla, rain, and fear. But no wolf. You're a latent." "Yes," Vivian whispered, the shame burning her cheeks. "I'm a latent, born without a wolf spirit. In the Sterling pack, that makes me worse than a human. It makes me a waste of resources." She looked up, her eyes wet but defiant. "That's why he sent me. He assumes you'll kill me when you find out I can't give you strong pups. And when you do, will use my death as an excuse to break the treaty and attack while you're distracted." Lachlan stayed silent for a long time. He took a slow drink, watching her over the rim of his glass. "He thinks I'm a mindless brute," Lachlan said finally. "He thinks I'll tear you apart because you're not perfect." He set the glass down with a heavy thud. "Take the dress off." Vivian panicked, crossing her arms over her chest. "What? No." Lachlan rolled his eyes. "I'm not going to touch you, Vivian. I don't force women, and I certainly don't bed spies until I know they aren't going to stab me in my sleep. But that dress is ridiculous, and you can't sleep in it." He walked to a dresser and pulled out a large black t-shirt, tossing it to her. "Put this on. You take the bed. I'll take the couch." Vivian caught the shirt, stunned. You're not going to consummate the marriage?" "The marriage is a political sham," Lachlan said, turning his back to give her privacy. "And until I figure out why your scent is so strange, I'm not risking it. You smell like a latent, yes, but there's something underneath it. Something dormant." Vivian quickly unzipped the heavy dress, letting it fall. She scrambled into the oversized shirt, which hit her mid-thigh. It smelled like him sandalwood and raw power. I'm decent, she said, small voice. Lachlan turned around, his gaze swept over her, lingering on her bare legs for a fraction of a second too long before snapping back to her face. Get some sleep, little wolf, he said, turning off the main lights, leaving only the glow of the city below. Tomorrow you meet the ironclad pack, and they are not as forgiving as I am. Vivienne climbed into the massive bed. The sheets were cold. She watched Lachlan stretch out on the sofa, his back to her. She didn't sleep. She lay awake, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing, wondering why the monster of the mountains had shown her the first kindness she'd known in years, and wondering what he meant about the something underneath. Morning in the obsidian peaks was brutal. The sun didn't rise so much as it glared off the snow, blinding and sharp. Vivienne woke to the sound of the door chiming. She sat up, disoriented. The sofa was empty. Lachlan was gone. The door slid open, and Weston, the beta she had met yesterday, stepped in. He carried a tray with coffee and a protein bar. King Lachlan requests your presence at the mess hall in 20 minutes, Weston said. He didn't bow. He didn't smile. He looked at her with clinical indifference. Wear something warm. The heating in the lower levels is temperamental. Vivienne scrambled to find her suitcase, which had been dumped in the corner. She pulled out a pair of thick jeans, combat boots, and a heavy wool sweater. She wasn't going to play the part of the dainty princess today. If she was walking into the lion's den, she'd dress for a fight. She followed Weston down the elevator and through a maze of stone corridors. The fortress was waking up. She passed wolves in human form, huge men and women with scars and tattoos, carrying weapons or training gear. They all stopped to stare at her. The silence was heavy, filled with judgment. The latent queen, the sterling mistake. She could practically hear their thoughts. Weston pushed open the double doors to the mess hall. The noise was deafening, clattering plates, shouting, laughter, until Vivienne stepped inside. Then silence. 300 heads turned. Vivienne kept her chin up. Fake it until you make it, she told herself. She scanned the room. At the far end, at a long table on a raised platform, sat Lachlan. He was eating a steak that looked barely cooked. He didn't wave her over. He just watched. This was a test. Can she walk the gauntlet? Vivienne took a breath and started walking. She kept her eyes on Lachlan, ignoring the murmurs that erupted as she passed. She's so small. I heard she has no wolf. Sterling trash. Just as she reached the steps to the high table, a boot shot out, blocking her path. Vivienne stopped. She looked down at the boot, then up at the owner. It was a woman. She was stunning in a terrifying way tall, with platinum blonde braids, muscles that rippled under a tight tank top, and eyes like chips of ice. This was Ingrid. Vivienne recognized her from the dossiers her father kept on enemy combatants. Ingrid was the pack's head warrior, and rumor had it she had been warming Lachlan's bed before the treaty. You're lost, little girl, Ingrid sneered, not moving her leg. The servants' entrance is in the back. The hall went quiet. Everyone waited for the new queen to react. Vivienne looked at Ingrid's leg, then at the steak knife on the table next to her. She didn't reach for the weapon. Instead, she smiled a sweet barista customer service smile. And you must be Ingrid, Vivienne said, her voice clear and steady. I've heard so much about you. Must be that you have excellent aim with a spear, but terrible aim with your ambition. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Ingrid's eyes narrowed. She stood up, towering over Vivienne. You think because you wear a ring you have power here? In the ironclad pack, power is earned in blood. Can you even shift, princess? Can you fight? No, Vivienne said simply. I can't shift. And I'm not going to fight you. Coward, Ingrid spat. It's not cowardice, Vivienne said, stepping closer to the warrior until they were nose to nose. It's management. I don't need to turn into a dog to know that tripping the king's wife on her first day is a strategic error. It makes you look petty, not strong. And this pack needs strength, doesn't it? Vivian stepped over Ingrid's leg, as if it were a piece of trash on the sidewalk, and walked up the stairs to the high table. She pulled out the chair next to Lachlan and sat down. Her heart was hammering so hard she thought it would explode, but her hands were steady as she reached for a pitcher of water. Lachlan cut another piece of his steak. He didn't look at Ingrid, who was fuming, her face red with humiliation. "Turn into a dog," Lachlan repeated, a low growl in his voice. "Careful, wife. That borders on blasphemy." "It got her to sit down," Vivian muttered, pouring water. Lachlan hid a smirk behind his coffee mug. He turned to the hall, his voice booming. "Ingrid." The warrior snapped to attention. "My king, run the perimeter. Double time, since you have so much excess energy to expend on hallway politics." "Yes, my king," Ingrid gritted out, shooting a look of pure hatred at Vivienne before storming out. Lachlan turned to Vivian. He placed a hand on the back of her neck, a possessive, claiming gesture that made the entire hall look away. "You have a sharp tongue," he murmured. "But be warned, words won't save you when the moon is full. You made an enemy today." "I was born with enemies, Lachlan," Vivian said, looking at her plate. "At least this one faces me front on." Lachlan studied her, his thumb stroking the sensitive skin behind her ear. He was about to speak when Weston approached the table, looking grim. He held out a sleek, black smartphone. "Your Majesty, a message for the Queen." Vivian frowned. "Who is it?" "It was left in your luggage," Weston said suspiciously. "We swept it for explosives. It's clean, but it's locked." Vivian took the phone. It was an old burner model. She recognized it immediately. It was Tobias's emergency phone. She keyed in the passcode, her birthday. A video message popped up. She pressed play. The screen flickered to life. It was Tobias. He was in the back of a car, his face bruised, blood trickling from his nose. He looked terrified. "Viv," Tobias joked out, tears mixing with the blood. "Viv, I'm sorry. Dad, he knew you'd try to make it work. He knew you wouldn't fail on purpose." The camera shook. A shadow fell over Tobias. "He's moving the timeline up, Viv," Tobias whispered, his eyes wide. "The gift in the lining of your suitcase. You have to find it. You have to." The video cut out abruptly with the sound of a car door slamming and a scream. Vivian dropped the phone. It clattered onto the table. Her blood ran cold. "What is it?" Lachlan demanded, sensing the spike in her fear scent. "My brother," Vivian whispered, standing up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "My suitcase. Where is my suitcase?" "In the tower," Lachlan said, standing up with her. "Vivian, what is going on?" "We have to go," she said, grabbing his arm, forgetting all protocol. "There's something in the suitcase," Tobias said. "He said the timeline is moving up." Lachlan's face hardened into stone. He barked an order to Weston. "Lock down the fortress. No one in or out. Scramble the signal jammers." He scooped Vivian up, literally sweeping her off her feet, and sprinted. He moved with a speed that blurred the world. They were in the elevator in seconds, and back in the penthouse moments later. Lachlan threw the suitcase onto the bed and ripped the lining open with his claws. There, nestled between the silk and the wool, was a small metallic device. It wasn't a bomb. It was a glass vial inside a metal casing. The liquid inside was glowing a faint, sickly green. Lachlan froze. He recognized it. "Is it poison?" Vivian asked, trembling. "No," Lachlan said, his voice terrifyingly quiet. "It's a beacon and a dispersal unit." He looked at Vivian, his amber eyes blazing with a fury that promised death. It's a pathogen, Vivian, designed to target Lycan DNA. Your father didn't just send you here to spy. He sent you here to be patient zero. Vivian backed away, horror dawning on her. I didn't know. But Timo, I know, Lachlan said, looking at the device. But the timer is already counting down. The digital display on the canister read 00:59. Mirth 58. They had less than a minute before the vial shattered, releasing a plague that would wipe out the ironclad pack. Run, Lachlan roared, grabbing the canister. Get to the safe room. What about you? Vivian screamed. I'm going to throw this off the mountain, Lachlan snarled, running for the balcony. Lachlan, no, it's too far. He didn't listen. He launched himself off the balcony, plummeting into the abyss, the canister clutched in his hand. Lay here, Lene, Vivian screamed, rushing to the edge. She watched as a massive shape-a-giant, midnight black wolf, larger than any grizzly bear, burst from his falling body in midair. The beast clamped the canister in its jaws and hurled it outward with supernatural force, just as the timer hit 0. A green cloud exploded in the air, hundreds of feet away from the walls, dissipating harmlessly in the high winds. But the force of the shift and the throw had disrupted his fall. The giant Lycan king slammed into the side of the cliff, sliding down into the deep, treacherous snow below. Silence returned to the peaks. Vivian stood on the balcony, the wind whipping her hair. He saved them. He saved her. And now she had to save him. The wind on the balcony screamed like a dying animal, tearing at Vivian's clothes and hair. Below, the abyss was a swirling vortex of white violently erasing the world. He's gone, Weston roared, dragging Vivian back from the edge just as a gust threatened to pull her over. Get inside, Your Majesty. The blast radius. He's not gone. Vivian fought against the beta's grip, her fingernails digging into his tactical vest. I saw him hit the ridge. He's down there. He fell 3,000 feet into a Class 5 blizzard. Weston shouted over the gale. Even a Lycan king. Is he your alpha or not? Vivian screamed, her voice cracking with a ferocity that made the hardened soldier pause. She shoved him away, stumbling back into the bedroom where the snow was already piling up on the expensive hardwood. If he's alive, he's hurt. If he's hurt, the cold will kill his healing factor. You know that. It was common knowledge in biology class. Extreme cold slowed a werewolf's metabolism to a crawl. If Lachlan was unconscious and buried, he wouldn't heal. He would freeze to death, like a human. Weston hesitated, looking at the radar on his wrist. The birds are grounded. The choppers can't fly in this visibility. The lift is frozen. Then we walk, Vivian said, grabbing a heavy fur-lined parka from Lachlan's closet. It swallowed her whole, smelling of cedar and him. I saw where he landed. It's the jagged shelf near the old mine shaft. I saw the map in the hallway. Ingrid appeared in the doorway, her face pale but her eyes burning with a mix of fear and malice. You're a human in a dress, Sterling. You'll die before you reach the first marker. Then I die, Vivian said, zipping the code with trembling hands. She grabbed a med kit from the wall and strapped it to her waist. But I'm going. Are you coming, head warrior? Or are you going to let the human save your king? Ingrid snarled, her upper lip curling to reveal elongated canines. If you slow us down, I leave you behind. Deal. The descent was hell. The path was a goat trail slick with black ice, hidden under 2 feet of fresh powder. The wind was a physical weight, pushing them toward the drop-off with every step. Weston led the way, tethered to the rock face. Ingrid brought up the rear. Vivian was in the middle, clipped between them. She couldn't see 2 feet in front of her. Her eyelashes froze together. Her lungs burned with every inhale of the razor-sharp air. But she didn't stop. He saved me, she chanted in her head. He jumped. He didn't have to jump. An hour passed, then 2. Vivienne's legs were numb blocks of wood. She slipped constantly, only the rope saving her from the void. Hold! Weston's voice crackled over the comms earpiece they all wore. Thermal signature, 200 yards east quadrant. Under the drift, they scrambled over the rocks. The landscape here was broken. Trees snapped like toothpicks by the avalanche Lachlan's fall had triggered. There, Ingrid pointed, a massive shape was half buried in the snow. It wasn't human. It was the great wolf. Lachlan's wolf form was terrifyingly beautiful obsidian fur, thick and matted with ice and blood. He was the size of a draft horse, but he was still, too still. Lachlan. Vivienne unclipped her carabiner and slid down the embankment, ignoring Ingrid's shout. She landed in the snow beside his massive head. His eyes were closed, his breathing was shallow, a wet, rattling rasp that vibrated through the ground. A jagged piece of shale, sharp as a spear, was embedded deep in his shoulder, oozing dark, almost black blood. "He's in shock," Weston said, dropping down beside her. He touched the wolf's flank. "His temperature is dropping. He's not regenerating. We can't move him," Ingrid said, her voice unusually quiet. "He's too heavy. And if we try to lift him with that rock in his shoulder, he'll bleed out." "We have to get him out of the wind," Vivienne said, looking around frantically. She spotted a dark fissure in the cliff face about 50 feet away. "The mine shaft. It's right there." "He can't walk, you idiot," Ingrid snapped. "He doesn't have to walk," Vivienne said, pulling the smelling salts from the med kit. "He just has to crawl." She cracked the capsule under the wolf's nose. Lachlan's giant body convulsed. A low, thunderous growl rumbled in his chest. His amber eyes flew open, glazed with pain and fury. He snapped his jaws, his teeth inches from Vivienne's face. "Lachlan," she shouted, not flinching. "It's me! It's Vivienne!" "You have to move. To the cave. Now." The intelligence in the wolf's eyes struggled to surface through the haze of agony. He blinked, focusing on her small, shivering form. He whined a sound so pitiful coming from such a monster that it broke Vivienne's heart. "Come on," she coaxed, backing toward the cave. "Follow me." It took every ounce of strength he had. Lachlan dragged himself through the snow, leaving a trail of red. Weston and Ingrid pushed from behind, straining against the massive weight. They collapsed into the mouth of the cave just as the storm intensified into a whiteout. The cave was small, dry, and smelled of old earth. Vivienne immediately went to work. "We need a fire," she ordered. "Ingrid, get wood. Weston, help me with the wound." For once, Ingrid didn't argue. She shifted into her wolf form, a sleek, gray hunter, and ran deeper into the mine to scavenge old timber. Vivienne knelt by Lachlan's head. He was fading again. His massive paw twitched, his claws scraping the stone floor. "I have to pull the rock out," Weston said, his hands shaking. "But the blood loss, without a transfusion." "Do it," Vivienne said, grabbing Lachlan's muzzle to keep his head steady. She pressed her forehead against his wet fur. "I'm here, Lachlan. I'm right here." Weston gripped the jagged shale. "On 3. 1, 1, 2, 3. He yanked. Lachlan roared a sound that shook dust from the ceiling. His jaws snapped shut, missing Vivienne's arm by a millimeter. He thrashed, his back legs kicking out, sending Weston flying into the wall. Blood gushed from the wound, hot and metallic. "Pressure!" Vivienne screamed. She ripped off her parka, then her sweater, leaving her in just a thermal undershirt. She bundled the wool sweater and pressed it deep into the gash in his shoulder. The heat coming off him was immense, but it was fading. "He's cold," Vivienne whispered, realizing the blood wasn't clotting fast enough. The Lycan healing wasn't kicking in. Why isn't he healing? The poison, Weston gasped, clutching his ribs where he'd hit the wall. The gas. He must have inhaled some before he threw it. It suppresses the wolf spirit. Lachlan's breathing slowed. His eyes drifted shut. The great wolf was dying. No, Vivienne sobbed. She climbed on top of him, pressing her entire body against his side, trying to transfer her warmth to him. You don't get to die. You promised to decide if you deep keep me, remember? You haven't decided yet. She buried her hands in his fur near his neck. And then it happened. As Vivienne's tears fell onto his open wound, mixing with his blood, a strange sensation washed over her. A pulse, a rhythm. Thump, 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 thump. It wasn't her heart, it was his. She could feel it inside her own chest. She gasped, pulling back. Her hands were coated in his blood, but where her skin touched his blood, the liquid seemed to shimmer. A faint golden bioluminescence began to spread from her palms into his fur. What? Weston stared, his eyes wide. The golden light seeped into the wound. Steam rose from the gash. The bleeding slowed, then stopped. The flesh began to knit together, visible to the naked eye. Lachlan took a deep, shuddering breath. The gray color of his gums turned pink. The ice on his fur melted. Vivienne stared at her glowing hands. She felt drained, dizzy, as if she had just run a marathon. The world tilted on its axis. Weston, she whispered, I think I'm going to pass out. And she did, collapsing onto the soft, warm fur of the monster she had just saved. The dream was strange. Vivienne was floating in a dark ocean, but she wasn't drowning. A massive black wolf was swimming beneath her, keeping her afloat, pushing her toward a shore made of gold. She woke up to the smell of antiseptic and the beep of machines. She opened her eyes. She was back in the fortress, in a hospital room. But she wasn't in a bed. She was curled up on the leather sofa, and across the room, sitting on the edge of a hospital bed, was Lachlan. He was in human form, shirtless, a thick bandage wrapped around his shoulder. He looked tired, bruised, and dangerous, but alive. He was staring at her, intense, unblinking. You were awake, he rasped. His voice sounded like he'd swallowed gravel. Vivienne sat up, wincing. Her head pounded. How long? 2 days, Lachlan said. He stood up. He moved stiffly, but with his usual power. He walked over to her. The storm broke yesterday. The evac team brought us in. He stopped in front of her. He reached out with his good hand and touched her cheek. His skin was warm. You came for me, he said. It wasn't a question. You jumped for me, she countered. Lachlan's eyes searched hers. Weston told me what happened in the cave. He said you glowed. Vivienne looked at her hands. They looked normal now. I don't know what that was. Adrenaline? Hallucination? Adrenaline doesn't close a 6-inch arterial tear in 30 seconds, Lachlan said grimly. And it doesn't neutralize a chemically engineered neurotoxin. He grabbed her hand, bringing it to his nose. He inhaled deeply. Your scent has changed again. The vanilla is still there, but the latent smell, it's gone. You smell like ozone, like the air after a storm. Before Vivienne could reply, the door burst open. It wasn't a doctor. It was a squad of armed guards, led by a tall, gray-haired man in a suit. This was Elder Thorne, the head of the Lycan Council. Seize her, Thorne barked, pointing a gnarled finger at Vivienne. 2 guards stepped forward. Touch her and lose the hand, Lachlan snarled, stepping in front of Vivienne. A low growl vibrated in his chest, and his eyes flashed gold. The guards hesitated, looking from their king to the council elder. She is a traitor, Lachlan, Thorne shouted. She brought a biological weapon into the heart of the ironclad territory. Her father's weapon nearly killed you. She saved me." Lycan roared. "She carried me out of that mountain, or she went down to finish the job when the bomb failed," Thorn countered. "She is a sterling. Deceit is in her blood. We have received a communion from Alpha Richard. He claims he had no knowledge of the device. He claims she planted it, that she's a radical acting alone to destabilize the region." Vivienne stood up, her legs shaking. "That's a lie. Tobias warned me. Richard set me up." "So says the spy," Thorn sneered. "We found the transmitter in your room. It was sending coordinates directly to the Sterling artillery range. You were painting a target on our backs, girl." Vivienne felt the blood drain from her face. Richard was thorough. He had framed her perfectly. "She stands trial," Thorn declared. "Tonight, under the blood moon. If she is innocent, the moon goddess will protect her. If she is guilty, the pack will tear her apart." Lycan stepped closer to Thorn, towering over the older man. "There will be no trial. She is my mate." "She is not your mate," Thorn yelled, losing his composure. "You have not marked her. There is no bite, no claim. She's a political prisoner with a ring, nothing more. And by Lycan law, I can demand her judgment." Lycan's fists clenched. He knew the law. Without the mating bite, the permanent severance of the soul into two bodies, he couldn't legally stop the council from trying a traitor, even if she was his wife. He turned to look at Vivienne. His eyes were desperate. "Mark me," Vivienne whispered. The room went silent. "What?" Lycan breathed. "Mark me," she said louder. "Bite me. Make me yours. If I'm your true mat, the council can't touch me. I fall under King's law, not council law." "Vivienne," Lycan said, his voice ragged. "If I bite you, and you are latent, the venom could kill you. It's too strong for a human system." "I'm not human," she said, thinking of the golden light in the cave. "And I'm not latent. We both know that now." She stepped past him, walking up to the guards. She held out her hands. "I submit to the trial." Lycan grabbed her arm. "Are you insane?" "No." She looked up at him, her green eyes fierce. "I'm buying time. If you bite me now, it looks like a cover-up. They'll depose you. I have to prove I'm not a traitor first. Then you can decide if I'm worth keeping." She looked at Thorn. "Take me to the holding cells." The dungeon. The cell was cold, damp, and smelled of despair. Vivienne sat on the stone bench, her mind racing. Richard Sterling had planned this perfectly. If the bomb worked, the ironclad pack died. If it failed, Vivienne took the fall, and he could claim he was a grieving father betrayed by a radical daughter, keeping his hands clean. "You have a visitor." The guard opened the heavy iron door. It wasn't Lycan, it was Ingrid. The blonde warrior walked in, carrying a small tray of food. She set it down on the floor. She didn't look smug. She looked conflicted. "Poison?" Vivienne asked dryly. "Stew," Ingrid said. "Beef and barley." She stood there, arms crossed, leaning against the wall. "You saved him." "I did," Vivienne said. "Why?" Ingrid asked. "Your father wants him dead. You could have left him in the snow. You could be free." "I don't want to be free if it means being a monster," Vivienne said. "And besides, he's the first person who saw me. Not the scar, not the mistake. Me." Ingrid stared at her for a long time. She reached into her boot and pulled out something. It was a phone. Not just any phone. It was the burner phone Vivienne had found. The one with Tobias's message. "Weston found this in the snow," Ingrid said. "Where you dropped it when you ran." Well, Vivienne's heart leaped. "Does it still work?" "Screen scrapped, but the memory card is intact," Ingrid said. She tossed the phone to Vivienne. "The council overlooked this evidence. They only presented the transmitter found in your room." Vivienne clutched the phone. "Why are you giving me this?" "You hate me." You want to be queen. I do want to be queen, Ingrid admitted. I trained for it my whole life. I thought I was the best match for him. She looked Vivian up and down. But I couldn't have carried him out of that ravine. And I certainly couldn't have healed a poison wound with whatever magic voodoo you did. Ingrid turned to the door. I'm a warrior, Sterling. I want to win, but I want to win a fair fight. If you're a traitor, I'll kill you myself. But if you're being framed, she shrugged. I hate incompetence more than I hate you. She banged on the door to be let out. Wait, Vivian called out. Can you get this to Lycan? Before the trial? Ingrid paused. The king is under guard. Thorn has him locked in the war room until the trial begins. He's afraid Lycan will tear the castle down to get to you. Then I have to play the video at the trial, Vivian said. They won't let you have a phone in the circle, Ingrid said. It's combat by truth, no tech, just claws and confessions. Vivian slumped against the wall. She had the proof, but no way to show it. Ingrid hesitated. There is one way. The right of the silver mirror. It's an old law. If the accused cannot speak, they can project their memory through a truth seer. We don't have a truth seer, Vivian said. They're extinct. No, Ingrid said, looking at Vivian with a strange expression. They aren't extinct. They just stopped shifting. She tapped her own temple. Think about it, Sterling. You have no wolf, but you can heal with a touch. You can resist Alpha Command, and in the cave, your eyes didn't flash gold. Ingrid leaned close, whispering through the bars. They flashed silver. Vivian stared at her reflection in the dark puddle on the floor. She wasn't a werewolf. She was something the Pax hadn't seen in 500 years. She was a silver witch, a conduit of the moon goddess herself. And tonight she was going to have to learn how to use magic she didn't know she had, or she was going to die. The obsidian amphitheater was a bowl of shadows, lit only by torches and the unforgiving glare of the full moon. Vivienne stood alone in the center of the pit. The stone beneath her bare feet was stained with centuries of judgment. Elder Thorn sat on the highest tier, looking down with disdain. The accused has no wolf, he bellowed to the hundreds of spectators. She has no defense. She is a vessel of deceit. I have a defense, Vivian said. The voice wasn't loud, yet it carried to the back rows, amplified by the strange humming energy in her veins. She looked directly at Lycan, who was chained to two massive pillars at the edge of the pit, his muscles straining against the enchanted iron. I demand the right of the silver mirror. A hush fell over the crowd. Thorn laughed a dry, rattling sound. A myth. The silver witches have been dead for 500 years. You are stalling, girl. Watch me, Vivian whispered. She closed her eyes. She didn't need the physical phone. She had watched the video enough times that it was burned into her memory. She reached for the silver thread inside her soul, the one she had found in the cave. She pulled. Her eyes snapped open, glowing not with the amber of a wolf, but with the blinding white of a star. A beam of pure light erupted from her chest, hitting the mist that swirled above the arena. The mist coalesced, solidifying into a massive, shimmering screen. The image was grainy, but unmistakable. It was Richard Sterling, sitting in his office, speaking to an unseen conspirator. The timeline is moving up, the giant projection of Richard sneered, his voice booming through the amphitheater. Vivian is the perfect carrier. Lycan won't suspect the weakling. Once the canister detonates, the ironclad leadership will be paralyzed. We strike at dawn. The projection dissolved into mist. The silence in the arena was absolute. Thorn stood up, his face pale. The evidence was irrefutable. It wasn't a trick of technology. It was a projection of truth, verified by the moon goddess herself. Treason, a voice growled. It wasn't Thorn. The chains holding Lycan snapped like dry twigs. The king stepped into the light, his aura so crushing that half the council fell to their knees. He didn't look at Thorn. He walked straight to Vivian, his eyes burning with a pride that eclipsed his rage. He stopped inches from her, shielding her from the council's gaze. He took her hand, the hand that had glowed with magic, and pressed it to his chest, right over his heart. "The Sterling Pack has declared war," Lycan announced, his voice dark and final. But they did not account for one thing. He turned to the crowd, lifting Vivian's hand high. "They gave me a queen who commands the moon." Lycan looked down at his wife, a smirk tugging at his lips. "I believe, my love, that I have decided to keep you." Vivian smiled, the silver fading from her eyes to reveal the warm green beneath. "Good, because I have a war to win and I need a ride." Lycan shifted. The massive black wolf materialized, lowering his head for her to climb on. As the Silver Witch rode the giant Lycan king out of the arena to lead the charge against her father, the ironclad pack began to howl not in judgment, but in reverence. And that is how the Mistake Daughter became the most powerful weapon in the Lycan world. Vivian didn't just survive the beast, she tamed him, saved him, and claimed a crown that was never meant for her. Richard Sterling wanted to start a war, but he forgot the most important rule of the wild: never back a wolf into a corner, especially one who has magic in her veins and a king at her side. I hope you enjoyed the story of betrayal, magic, and romance. If you did, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story. What do you think happened to Richard Sterling? Did he surrender, or did Lycan get his revenge? Let me know your theories in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.